So thou, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, thou shalt hear the word of my mouth, and warn them from me.
Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them.
Coming to you from an undisclosed location in Middle Tennessee and examining current events from a biblical perspective, this is Bible News Radio with your hosts, Randall and Stacy Harp.
All right. Hey, everybody. I want to welcome all of you lovely people and your pets to our show today. I just had to throw the pets in there. Occasionally, you know, people let their pets listen. And I am an equal opportunity person, people. Anyway, hey, I just want to welcome you to the show. I hope you guys have your Bible, because you know what? Today we're going to look at the book of Ruth. Yeah. You know, Ruth is a little teeny weeny book in the Old Testament. Yeah, it is. Only 4 chapters, but I have to tell you, it is one of the best books ever. Between you and me, it's one of my favorite books ever. So, go get your Bible. Hello, Magnus in Sweden. Shalom, my brother. Glad that you're out there. And also Joe and Mia and Melanie and Jonathan and Oddvar. Hello, Oddvar. You hold a special place in my heart, brother. And I still always think about Aardvarks when I see your name. I don't know why. I do not know why that is Oddvar, but I'm glad you're here. And I want to thank you for sharing that out. Gustavo, nice to see you. Did I say your name right? Gustavo? I think I did. Gustavo. All right, go ahead and share that. Okay, thank you guys on Periscope for sharing it out. Because as you know, when you share, sharing is caring. Yeah, it is. All right, let's go over on Facebook, see if anybody's here yet. And I'm going to share it over on Facebook. So some of you over there can see that we're on air. One moment, please, as I do this. Takes skill, you know. All right. And Melanie, thank you for posting in Daily Disciples. I appreciate that. All right. All right. And of course, as always, I have to thank my beloved Bearface for producing this show. Because without him, I would not be doing this way. It would be like everybody else on Periscope, just sitting behind a phone with no cool, sweet graphics, music, and everything. So, of course, I have to thank my hunky husband for being so hunky, and my husband. You do such a good job. I love you, man. Yeah, I do. All right. All right, thank you and good night. I just had to say that because it was fun. Okay, so today it's Tuesday. I know it feels like Monday because we all think it's Monday, right? Just admit it. You know it does. But yesterday was Memorial Day and we celebrated, well, you don't celebrate Memorial Day, but you remember those who died in our spot so that, you know, we could have freedom, at least here in America. And I don't know about you guys, but for me it was a very good day and it was very relaxing, and I ate a lot of junk food, which I don't normally admit, just so you know. I did. Yeah, I did. Okay, but that's all right. Because today is Tuesday, and we have an awesome interviewer. Well, not an awesome interviewer, awesome guest on the show right now. Yeah, we do. Her name is Carolyn, which, by the way, incidentally, is one of my favorite girl names ever. I love that name. I really do. Carolyn Custis James is her name. She wrote this brand new book called Finding God in the Margins, the Book of Ruth. Here it is, people. I don't know. Can you see it? Should I pull it back? All right. Anyway, this is a very cool book cover, and it's a thin book, as you can see. It's not that big. But I tell you what, it is packed with info about the Book of Ruth and women and men and the role of women and men, and it's really a cool perspective that I've never really heard because, you know, I've been a Christian for, I don't know, 36 years or something. I don't know. And I've always heard the Book of Ruth presented one way, and Carolyn has written it, giving us a different perspective but it's a biblical perspective, I might add. So I hope you guys, get a copy of the book, because you're going to learn a lot. And if you're a woman in particular, or a man even, but if you're a woman in particular who's ever felt marginalized, or like your life doesn't matter, or like, you've had these hard knocks in your life, you weren't able to have kids, or you were widowed or something, and you're kind of discounted in society, this book is going to totally encourage you, just so you know. All right, so I'm going to have Carolyn come on, and we're going to say hi first. Yeah, we will.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. It's good to be with you.
Well, thank you for being my guest. I appreciate it. Randall's going to always tell me to look over there, so I'm going to try to look over there. Okay. All right. So, because I'm not really super great at giving credentials, you just want to tell everybody what your background is, because I think it's a pretty good, they need to know how smart you are and all the stuff that you studied, so you wrote this book.
Oh, well, I grew up in the church. I'm a pastor's daughter. And what do you want to know? I did go to seminary. I'm a seminary graduate, and that has led to things that I didn't expect. I'm an author. I've written 7 books. You should read them all. What else? I speak and do conferences, give lectures at colleges and seminaries. I speak in different churches. I've gone to different places in the world to do it. I'm probably the most surprised person to be able to say those things. But anyway, and I'm very passionate about 21st century issues for women and for men, questions we're all wrestling with.
Very cool. All right.
I also have a hunky husband.
You do, huh? That's cool. So how long you been married?
You'd be thrilled if you knew I said that.
So, well, I think you should let him watch the replay.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he'll go, oh my gosh.
He always tells me to introduce him as a hunk.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important. Yeah. So how long have you been married? A long time?
We have been married 38 years.
Wow. You've been married a long time. That's longer than me.
Yeah, no, it's been a real ride. It's been amazing.
Very cool.
I tell you that I would not be doing anything that I do if it wasn't for my husband. I am married to an amazing person. When we first got married, I thought, okay, I know what the rules are and how to do this. And he said to me, you need to find out what your gifts are and what God wants you to do with your life. And I'm not the answer to that question. That was the beginning.
Wow.
So, yeah. It's been amazing. Every time a door opens a crack, he sees it first and pushes me right through. So, yeah.
Isn't that cool? See, and I think this is such a great place to start the conversation, because marriage today is, I think it's biblical marriage is under attack, as between one man and one woman. And I think that the roles of men and women have subtly, intentionally been shifted over the last couple of decades in particular. And the role of men and women, as we know, God gave Adam and Eve distinct roles to complement one another. And I think that's been attacked and marred. And been lost, right? I mean, in many ways, because the feminism movement. Sorry, Bareface is like, over here. The camera is over here. Sorry, I have to look at the camera. Anyway, things have changed a lot. I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen it. I was trained as a therapist, and I look at how I was trained as a therapist compared to looking at marriage during my training versus marriage today, and how it's seen as a whole in culture. And it's not valued as much by the culture as I think it should be. But what do you think makes a good marriage? All that to say that question.
I think a deep friendship that, I think I've been learning as I go along. that I think of marriage as an alliance that I want my husband to be faithful in how he walks with God. I want to be with him in the struggles. I want to have his back. I want to be his sounding board, his best friend. And he does that for me. And, you do life together. And sometimes, when our daughter was a baby, I was the breadwinner. And so, we got it all topsy-turvy. He was working on his doctorate, and he was Mr. Mom for that first year, and so, I think for me, marriage is that you're doing life together, and whatever comes, you're going to both put your full self into it. So sometimes I tell my husband that, the vows that people say they want to renew their vows. And I say, but I think I would promise a whole lot more than I promised when we got married, that, to be in the battle with him, to be his ally, to be the roadblock when he heads down a wrong path, but to be for him in every possible way. So we've learned, we came from opposite backgrounds, because I came from a pastor's family, sort of Leave It to Beaver. And he came from a single mom, had a single mom, and some pretty rough things that happened in her life. And so, I had very fixed ideas of what I thought marriage should be like. And all he knew was what he didn't want. Mm-hmm. And God has done some amazing things for us. It's been a grand adventure.
Very cool. Well, and you know what? It worked, right? You guys made it work, with that diverse background. I know Randall and I, between our 4 original parents, my mom, dad, his mom, dad, there were 12 marriages between them. And a litany of abuse on both sides, and no faith tradition, really. We both became Christians and just radically brought together by God. There's no other way to say it. I was on my way to therapy one day when I was 20 years old, and I took a wrong turn. I was like, hey, and I'm like, where the heck am I? I have no clue where I'm at. And anyway, long story short, I ended up at this church, and I was like, I should probably move down to this city. And so I moved, and I went to that church because it was the only church I knew in the area. And Randall was standing there at the door with his tie on and looking all cute and everything. And he was the greeter. He invited me to a volleyball game as the singles. I guess, were you actually the pastor? I don't know if you were or not, but
no, I was offered the position, but
he didn't take it. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I went out on a date with him, and the rest, as they say, is history. And we've been married almost 26 years, which is a record, actually, with the exception of Randall's father, who's been married, I think, 40 years to his second wife. The Lord can heal that. That's my point, that he can bring those backgrounds together and still, create a good marriage. And men and women together need to make that marriage. And what you just said about if you're going to renew your vows, you would promise a whole lot more. I totally get that. Me and Randall, we renewed our vows on our show on our 20th anniversary. And it meant so much more to me doing it then than it does, than it did when I got married. Because when I got married, I was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'm giving my life to this guy. But yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's pretty cool. So.
Yeah.
So I bring this up because Ruth and Boaz are a couple. And, the book of Ruth is a little book that often when people read it, they go, oh, this is a cute little book. And a lot of people don't quite get the depth of what's actually going on in this book. So I want you to tell us why you chose to write about it and the different perspective in which you chose to write about it. You titled the book Finding God in the Margins. So why did you name the book that?
Well, first of all, any book of the Bible that you read, we all need to remind ourselves that we aren't reading an American book, that we're foreigners to the world of the Bible, and that we will not understand the potency of the message if we don't leave our shores and acquaint ourselves with that world. So, when we look at the book of Ruth, traditionally we've sort of skipped over Naomi and all her fussing in the beginning, and we've been very critical of her because we love the part when Ruth and Boaz meet and they fall in love. This is how we have been told. Mm-hmm. And that he proposes marriage, and he accepts, and they get married, and she has a baby, and it's just like happily ever after. That's the way we've been told. But when you put the book of Ruth up against the backdrop of the patriarchal world, you get a completely different story. And I didn't come up with this. I've heard it from Hebrew scholars that they were starting to look at the book of Ruth as the story of a female Job. So when you look at Naomi, the first thing that you learn about her is that she's married and she has 2 sons. Well, in the patriarchal world, and we know this about places in the Middle East and in Africa and India today, a woman's job in marriage is to produce sons for her husband. Women in the Bible who are barren and pleading with God are not pleading for daughters. They're pleading for sons. Right. And you gauge a woman's value by counting her sons. So she doesn't have any sons. She's a 0. But when we start the book, Naomi has 2. And so there's a famine that comes to Bethlehem. If we've lived in America our whole lives, we don't know what famine is. We can read about it and we can watch, documentaries. But, when we say we're starving, it's like go to the fast food place or open the fridge. Right. But we're not really starving. And so, but they end up becoming famine refugees. Well, that's something else that we're learning about in today's world, the life of a refugee. I mean, that would be enough to traumatize Naomi. And they go to the country they go to is in the Old Testament, it's called Moab. Today it's called Jordan. And they flee there because there's food. They become famine refugees. And when they get there, Naomi's husband dies and she's widowed, but she has double insurance because she has 2 sons. Those 2 sons marry pagan girls. I mean, Naomi's sufferings are just being compounded. And then they go through 10 years of double infertility. There's no child born, no son to carry on for the next generation. And that means the family is dying out, which is a calamity in that world. Right. And then instead of finally a positive pregnancy test, both of Naomi's sons die. She's postmenopausal. Unlike Job, she's not going to get to start over. And so what Naomi does for us is she puts out front and center the questions that we all encounter when our lives fall apart and we wonder where God is and does he really care about me? And for her, it's, the story's over. There's no more story for her. And so that's what the book of Ruth is about, is Naomi thinks God has turned against her. And God doesn't answer her through a prophet or a bolt of lightning or a voice out of the blue. He doesn't send a messenger of any kind. He speaks to her and he answers her through Ruth. Yeah. And so that's how the story gets set up. But then Ruth herself, for me, is one of the most astonishing and strong women in the entire Bible. I mean, her story completely disrupted mine.
Yeah, and now that I've read most of your book, as you know, I can understand why. And you know, I have to go back and read more of it and just like marinate in it, what you wrote, because I understand what you're talking about. And it's always bothered me. It's always bugged me personally that the beginning of the book of Ruth, where we get the pre, you know, basically the prequel, what happened, you know, there's Naomi and she loses her kids. It to me, it's always been like, how come nobody talks about this? You know, you know what I mean? It is like, because I've always read it and thought, man, you know, because she says, well, just call me Mara. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, like that would, of course, you know, I mean, if I lost 2 children, I would definitely be a little bit bitter and sad and grieved over that. You know what I mean?
You don't get over these losses. I mean,
right.
We talk about Gold Star families or the families of kids that have been shot in schools, and, you know, we move on, but they don't move on from that, you know. And Naomi is a sufferer right through the end of the book. You don't get over it. You know, you wrestle with God. It makes you ask hard, important questions. And the book of Ruth is saying that's important. Mm-hmm. It's not, you know, in fact, one of the messages from the book of Ruth is that our struggles matter, that those are places where God does deep work in us. And we're all wounded in different ways, but God works through those wounds, and he does that in the book of Ruth.
Yeah, you wrote something in here. I wanted to read it. Let's see here. I could probably find it. It might take me a minute. Let's see here. By the way, everybody, in case you don't know, my guest Carolyn Custis James, she has a bachelor's degree in sociology and also a master's in biblical studies, and she's an adjunct faculty member at Biblical Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, so she knows a little bit about the Bible, just so you know. She studied this stuff, in other words, way more than me. But there's a quote in here about it was near the end of the book. And I'm probably going to take it completely out of context. Here it is. It's in the Better Than 7 Sons chapter. You wrote here, from start to finish, the book of Ruth is... No, that's not it. The paragraph above. Naomi's experience echoes what grieving Yale professor Nicholas Walterstorff, did I say that right, wrote in the aftermath of his son's tragic death in a mountain climbing accident. The world has a hole in it now. I shall look at the world through tears. Perhaps I shall see things that dry-eyed I could not see. That choked me up when I was reading it, because I thought, you know what? That is so deep. And then you go on to say, the whole story of Ruth shifts into high gear when Naomi gains a clearer understanding of Yahweh precisely because she looked at the world through tears.
Yeah.
That is so... For that 2 paragraphs, this book is worth it. Just for that. I mean, that's gold. That is so gold, because nobody talks about that today. In fact, everybody likes to avoid the whole issue of suffering, and yet we all do it. You know what I mean? We all suffer in some way. So address that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, I think we've done that to the book of Ruth, where we try to make it be a happily ever after story. You know, that at the end there's a baby boy born and Naomi's holding him and the women are celebrating and saying, Naomi has a son. This baby replaces her dead son and will carry on the family and inherit, you know, her husband's property. And so it's life for another generation for this family. But, you know, Naomi and Job went to their graves grieving. And, you know, and I think we're especially guilty of this in American Christianity, because we have the American dream and we sort of conflate that with Christianity. And, you know, Jesus is supposed to come through with that for us. And, you know, when you look at the world and the suffering that people go through, and, you know, a lot of us have an easier path, but we still grieve when we still have losses that can't be replaced. And, you know, people who lose a child may have 6 other children, but they've lost that child, you know, nothing takes the place of that child. But what I've learned from Naomi is that our struggles matter. They're not just hurdles in the road for us to get over, but they're places where God meets us in deeper ways, where our eyes are opened to him in new ways, and also to the suffering of others. It can make us hard, it can make us angry, it can make us bitter, or it can deepen us and tenderize us. And Naomi, the change for Naomi doesn't come at the end. The change for Naomi comes when Ruth brings home the gleanings that she's harvested. And I'm sort of getting ahead of the story, but that's when Naomi sees, because Ruth brings home so much more than she ever expected her to bring. Mm-hmm. It's a staggering load that she brings home. And that's when this hungry, widowed, forgotten zero of a woman sees that God has not forgotten her. And even the story itself is remarkable from that standpoint, because, when all the men die and the women who are left, one is postmenopausal, the other is barren, and neither of them have sons, the story is over. I've always said the story begins by ending. And if you ask the women if there was a story here, they both say, there's no story here. And yet that's when the biblical camera zooms in on these two women that they're in the margins. Right. The world cares nothing about them. They're actually at risk for their safety because they have no rights and no voice and no agency. And yet the camera zooms in and the real story begins with these two women that the world would count out. It's very powerful.
Well, not only that, but when we're looking at it from a 21st century, perspective, we're able to look back and go, oh my gosh, these women were in the line of David, and Jesus came through the line of David, through that particular thing. And what really struck me about your book, though, too, is Naomi was real. And, a lot of people don't like, well, I don't want to be that real. That sucks. I don't want to be that real, but she was real. And it's interesting because there was two. There was Ruth and the other daughter-in-law. I can't remember her name. But she left, which, people have commented about that. But the obedience of Ruth to really serve her mother-in-law despite her own grief, and what you talk a lot about God's mercy throughout that whole story, and just what an example of faith she is. And I really want you to talk about that a little bit, because there are women I know in my audience who don't have children like I do, who are single, who have had horrible things happen to them that made them end up single, who probably feel like they're in the margin, like Ruth did.
Well, if you look at Ruth's demographics, all she has are deficiencies. Mm-hmm. She's Arab, she's female, she is poor, she's widowed, she's barren. She becomes an undocumented immigrant. She comes to this foreign country. What happens on the road from Jordan to Bethlehem is a conversion. And it comes against the darkest possible backdrop. Naomi's saying all the wrong things about God. And Ruth has witnessed the collapse of Naomi's world without a whisper of interference from her God. And yet Naomi's a light bearer, even in that horrible time in her life. And Ruth moves to the light. And it is such a shocking decision for her to be making. But she comes to Bethlehem with nothing but deficiencies. She's totally at risk. And I love that, because it's like the Bible makes the picture as dark and bleak as it can possibly be. And yet this is the young woman whose actions are going to lead to the revival of Naomi's faith in God and Naomi's mobilization for the kingdom. Her actions are going to change the life of Boaz, who is an incredible man, and he becomes even more incredible through his interactions and what he learns from her. And God is moving his purposes for the world forward on the shoulders of a nobody. And last week I met with a group of women who were, I told you they were in their 80s and their 90s when we were talking before the program. And I loved being able to tell those women, nobody's story is more important than your story. And we don't know what God is accomplishing through you. Ruth never knew. Mm-hmm. Naomi never knew. Boaz never knew that what God was doing had cosmic implications. So, it is finding God in the margins. And, we look at all the big name Christian celebrities and think, wow, they're doing so much for God. And you know what? We don't know where God's doing the big things. It may be through somebody we've never heard of and never will hear of. So it may be the person who's listening right now to what we're talking about. God is subversive in how he works. Mm-hmm. And, he's not working always through the big shots. And some of them are in a lot of trouble right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. But he's subversive in how he works. Sometimes he works through a little child. Sometimes he works through an older woman that the world thinks she's done. Her life has peaked and now it's on the downhill. We don't know that. We don't know that. A simple word somebody may say of encouragement to someone could ripple on beyond what anyone would ever dream. Yeah. So, yeah, I find this so radical and revolutionary and shocking and, just wonderfully subversive in what God is doing. Who would guess that everything was hanging on what these three people were going to do?
I know. And, you made the perfect point there that they didn't know. I mean, they didn't know that they ended up being in the lineage of Christ. Ultimately. I mean, they
were feeding the family. Right. They were feeding Naomi. And they were trying to rescue Elimelech's dying family for another generation. They were just taking care of local family issues.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? Hey, everybody, does this encourage you? Better. Or else my job and my mission has not been accomplished yet in this episode. All right, we got to take a break. Just so you know, people. Yeah, we do. Let's thank our sponsor, Ariel Ministries. I don't know if you know who Ariel Ministries is. This is a ministry of Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum, who founded Ariel, 40-something years ago. He is a Hebrew scholar, Messianic Jewish guy. And anyway, if you go to ariel.org, you can save 20% when you use the coupon code Bible News. Yeah, you can, because that tells them it's from us, Bible News. And not only that, but if you go over to my website, BibleNewsRadio.com, you go over to my resources page. This is still May. Yeah, it is. And we're giving away his free Bible study on giving, the biblical principles of giving. You can just click that, download it, open it up. You don't even have to join my email list, but you should join it. You should join my email list while you're over there, because you get info on it when I email you, which is a couple times a week. And don't forget, also, while you're over there on the website, which I know Randall's going to put back up. Yeah, you are. Bullhorn, the mobile app. Hey, do you believe that God gives you a bullhorn? That's actually a fake trumpet, just so you know. But hey, anyway, Bullhorn is a mobile app. It's owned by freeconferencecall.com, which is a Christian company. I met these guys at NRB. And anyway, it's in beta, but if you guys have the Bullhorn app, those of you who've downloaded it, you know what you need to do? Go and update it, because they updated it over the weekend. And so you might be able to see some different stuff in there. But anyway, Bullhorn is just follow me over there. I'm doing a Bible study every day on it, okay? I'm in 2 Timothy chapter 3 right now. We're looking at all of that fun stuff, all of that stuff that nobody wants to talk about but me. So go download it, follow me, I'll follow you back. We'll follow each other. We'll be like walking in a circle. No, just kidding. We won't actually be walking in a circle. But anyway, just follow me on the app. And what else? Oh, yes. Coming next week, I have a very special announcement that I will be sharing with all of you on a new venture I've been keep barking on that will benefit some of you if you choose to follow me in my steps, which you don't want to follow my steps because they're little. Some of you have bigger feet than me, but that's beside the point. Stay tuned next week for a special announcement. In the meantime, I gotta tell you, if you want to support our show, become a pillar of our community, people. That's the people who give us money every month because they love us so much. Helps us to feed Grover and Tuggy Bear, my 2 dogs, and Gideon, my cat, even though, well, sometimes he doesn't deserve to eat because he's a cat. But that's okay. We don't hold it against him. We named him after the Gideons International after all. Now, in all seriously, if you go over to PayPal and you set up an automatic payment, that would rock. All right? So do that. Become a pillar of the community. If you don't want to be a pillar, then you can be a pebble and donate once a month, or not once a month, like whenever you feel like it. Okay? Just so you know. Yeah. I know. That was deep. Is that it? Am I forgetting anything? Did I remember everything important? Oh, no. Tomorrow, I should tell you, tomorrow is the end of my contest for Virginia Prodan's book, Saving My Assassin. I interviewed her last week, and we're giving 2 of her books away. So if you haven't entered it yet, right now I think I got like 50 entries into it, something like that. If you haven't entered yet, you still have a chance to win one of the copies of the book. So go over to my social media on Twitter at Bible News Radio, or Facebook at Bible News Radio, or anywhere at Bible News Radio, and follow it and enter the contest, okay? Because you're going to want her book, just so you know. All right. Today, however, you want this book, Finding God in the Margins, the Book of Ruth. This is a little book that actually packs a powerful punch of theological insight that, frankly, you need to read. And I'm not just saying that. I actually really do. The end of the book, Carolyn, you actually write about, okay, in the last 2 chapters, you write about the manly side of the story and Better Than 7 Sons. And before that, you wrote about all the rules that Naomi and Ruth broke. And I thought that was amazing because I never even, knew that because I don't know a lot of stuff. So I want you to address all of that in the next however many minutes we have, 20 minutes. Can you do that? I mean, is that too much in that short of a time?
Yes. No, I'd love to.
Okay, because this is so good, you guys. You're never going to look at the Book of Ruth again the same. Trust me. This is meat stuff, okay? Okay, I'll be quiet now.
And some people have told me they're very happy that it's a little book because it's more, when you pick up a book to read, I'm reading one that's like 900 pages and I keep asking my husband, do you think I can do this? But this one is smaller, but you're right, there's a lot there. What impacted me the most at first about the Book of Ruth was Ruth herself. And what I was hearing from scholars, and they were male scholars, and I don't think they realized how it came across to me, but they said that Ruth is initiating the action in the story. And you see that even though in this culture, women didn't have agency, she is making decisions all the way through, and she's making initiatives with Boaz, and she's choosing what she's going to do. And what they said is she's leading the action and he's responding. And that to me was earth-shaking because I had never thought of myself as a woman, as somebody who would initiate anything. And it was a time of real devastating grief for me that I didn't realize God expected so much of me. That I didn't realize I had so much responsibility, that I'm, thinking other people are going to take care of things and that I don't have responsibility to see what's going on and do something. So But she decides on the way back, when Naomi's coming back home, really coming home to die, she decides she's going to go with her. And it's just an insane decision. And everybody knew that, because the safest place would be back with her family in Jordan. But she comes with she embraces Naomi. She embraces Naomi's God, and she embraces Naomi's people. And now she's somebody different. And she really is. I mean, the girl who arrives in Bethlehem isn't the same girl as the one who left Jordan. And she has vowed to take care of her mother-in-law. And what she ends up doing with Boaz, and here he is, a native-born Israelite. He's been raised on the Mosaic law, and she's going to challenge him on 3 Mosaic laws. The first law she challenges him on is the gleaning law, which says that a man who owns a field, his harvesters can only clear the field one time, and they can't go back to pick up anything they've missed, and they have to leave the edges and the corners of the field unharvested. And when they're finished and they clear the field, then the gleaners can come. And the gleaners are the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner, the immigrant. And this is how they have a hand-to-mouth survival. And Ruth doesn't want to take home scraps to her mother-in-law. Ruth lives on the hungry side of the law, and the law reads differently from that vantage point. And so she proposes to Boaz the difference between the letter of the law, which says clear your field as much as you want and leave how wide is an edge or a corner. Mm-hmm. Doesn't say, how much are you going to leave behind? And they've just been through a famine. So, what are they going to do? She does not want to take home scraps to Naomi, and she challenges his interpretation to Mosaic law. And he is in compliance with the letter of the law. Gleaners are allowed in his field. She wants to glean where the male harvesters have just cut the grain down and it's lying on the field for the female harvesters to come along and bundle it up to be carried off. And Boaz listens to her. She's nobody. She's an immigrant.
Yeah.
And he listens to her and he learns from her. And he has got enormous power and privilege, and he throws his full weight behind what she's trying to do. When she goes home at the end of the day to Naomi, she doesn't take home a fistful of grain or stories of rape and abuse. She brings home 29 pounds of winnowed barley. A male harvester would have to work a half of a month or a full month to bring home that much in pay. So It is a massive load. And that's when Naomi realizes that God has not forgotten her, that his love is still present with her. And that's the turning point for Naomi. So the next chapter is the threshing floor chapter, where everybody gets all worried about what's going on. What's happening is Naomi is worried that she's going to leave her daughter-in-law alone in Israel when she dies, because Naomi's older. And so because Boaz has been gracious to her daughter-in-law through the whole season, she sends her daughter-in-law to him in a plea for mercy. She's not sending her daughter-in-law to get a baby. Her daughter is barren. Right. She's been through 10 years of suffering with her. She's not going to reopen that painful chapter. But when Ruth goes to Boaz in the dark of night, and I always call this the Me Too story that could have happened but didn't, because Boaz is a different kind of a man. And so she goes to him in the dark of night. She does exactly what her mother-in-law says, and then she turns and embraces her own script. Mm-hmm. And she's challenging Boaz on 2 more Mosaic laws. It's the Levirate law and the kinsman redeemer law. The Levirate law has to do with the survival of the family, with the missing male heir. The kinsman redeemer law has to do with real estate. What Ruth is doing when she says, throw your garment, your cape over me, for you are our kinsman redeemer. It's language that Naomi didn't use when she sent her to Boaz. It's legal language. And it's the throw your garment over me is a proposal of marriage. So she's asking for marriage. She's asking, okay, so the Levirate law is about marriage. And it says, when a man dies without a male heir, his blood brother is supposed to marry the widow, and the son born to that union will take the dead man's place on the family tree. Well, none of the living brothers wanted to do this in other stories, because when their brother died, their inheritance got bigger. If they replace him, their inheritance is going to shrink back down. And so, but Boaz isn't a blood brother. He's not a blood brother. And so, he's beyond the letter of the law. The kinsman redeemer law says that if your relative falls on hard times and has to sell his land, that the nearest relative is to purchase the land and raise it up again. And the year of Jubilee, the land will revert back to the original owner. All of these laws are a call to sacrifice. Boaz is not the blood brother, and he's not the nearest relative. So he's beyond the law. He's got all sorts of loopholes to jump through, but he understands what she's doing. And he says to her, there's a nearest relative, so he honors that relative's right, because if she doesn't give birth to a son, whoever gets Elimelech's land will double his property. But if she gives birth to a son, that son will inherit Elimelech's property. And that's why the nearest relative doesn't want to do it. But Boaz pledges to her that he will make sure this happens. So it's, and he talks about her before anything, before anybody knows how it's going to turn out. He is described, when he's introduced into the story, as a man hayel. That's a Hebrew word that means a man of strength and valor and stature and might. And that's what he calls her, is a woman hayel. I mean, she doesn't measure up to the culture's value system of a woman. She's foreign, she's poor, she's barren, she has no sons, and he gives her this high compliment about her character. It's a revolutionary turn of events and an overthrow of patriarchy's value system. It's so amazing.
It's actually totally cool. I mean, it really is revolutionary what you just said, and you also bring out in Genesis, right, when Adam and Eve were created, the different Hebrew words that God used for that. Can you expand on that? Because that carries over to what you were talking about just now.
Yeah, and it's very big. And we always look at the creation of male and female in Genesis chapter 2 as the creation of marriage, but it only talks about marriage at the very end of the chapter, when it says a man should leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, which, by the way, is a very anti-patriarchal statement, because under patriarchy, she's absorbed into his family.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But it's the creation of male and female. So God looks at the man and says it's not good for the man to be alone. There's nothing wrong with the man. He's a masterpiece. He's created at the climax of God's creative activity. God is teaching us about human relationships. And God says it's not good for the man to be alone. It doesn't define any parameters to that. It doesn't say it's not good for him to be alone in the home. It's a blanket statement. And then he says, what I'm going to make is an azer kenegdo. The word azer is a word that is used mostly in the Old Testament for God. It's translated helper most of the time, but it's God as the helper of his people. But when I studied this word, I looked up all the references to the word there 21 times in the Old Testament. In every situation where it appears, it's used in a military context, where God is our shield and defense. He's better than chariots and horses. He stands sentry watch over his people. It's used for 3 nations. Israel wants them to send their army because they're under attack. And then it's used twice for the woman in creation. And when you look at creation, really Eden, which we think of as paradise, was a war zone. There's an enemy getting ready to attack. Mm-hmm. What do you call that?
True.
And I believe, and there's lots of evidence for this in Hebrew studies, that the word Azer, that the Azer is a warrior, that she's created to stand alongside the men in her life, whether it's her brothers or her colleagues or her friends or her husband or her father or her sons. It's that men and women need each other. And it just shows you how the world is like turning in on itself like an immune system that's gone awry, because male-female relationships are at terrible lows. You know, with all the Me Too and Church Too stories that are coming out, it's the exact opposite of what God intended, that we should be an alliance for his purposes in the world, and that we're stronger together. Anyway, so both Ruth and Naomi are Azers. I have a Pennsylvania license plate that says Azer, because I want that on my backside when I'm heading out, that I'm an Azer, that I'm called to be in the battle for God's kingdom, to be a light bearer in the world, to be good news wherever I go.
Yeah.
And that's what Ruth is for sure. And then Naomi joins her.
Yeah. And, you know, I just want to remind our audience, I had not too long ago, I had Sandra Glahn on our show, who is with, I think, Dallas Theological Seminary, right? And she wrote that book, Vindicating the Vixens. Well, Carolyn here, she actually contributed to that book, just so you guys know. Okay. So I just wanted to throw that in there too, just because, you know, I've had some very, well-respected women's biblical scholars on the show, which you don't get on Periscope a whole lot, just so you know. And you wrote about other women being marginalized too in Sandra's book. But I just want to bring that out because so many people don't see the stuff that you're bringing out. And honestly, you know, reading what I read today and just what you just said, you know, I fit that profile so much as a person. It's like, oh, I can see like how this works out in my life. And I'm hoping that part of your goal, I think it is that people out there watching, if they're in that situation, they kind of see maybe that's them too. In the Me Too, not the anti-Me Too way, but the Me Too as far as God's calling thing.
Yeah. And, you know, not to take anything away from Boaz, because what you see in him is a man who uses his power and privilege,
right?
You know, not as an entitlement, but as a force for good. I mean, nothing would have happened in this story if he hadn't listened to her.
Yeah.
If he hadn't been willing to learn and to change and to grow. And he throws his power and privilege, what he does in the final chapter of the story, and nobody puts up a fuss against him, is absolutely astonishing. You know, so, I mean, to me, it's a book that shows the best of men and women and how God's kingdom moves forward when they make sacrifices for one another, when they use all that they have for the sake of the good of the other. It's the gospel. You know, it's the gospel in the Old Testament. That's what Jesus calls us all to.
Yes. Well, and you know, I think that's the point. You know, you made the point that a lot of times women say they're waiting for their Boaz. It's not a bad thing, right? But they might not understand it the way that I now understand it. And I have to say, my man is he's like a Boaz, you know, I'm sure your man is as well. And there are good men out there, people, just so you guys know. There are good men out there. There are good women out there. If you happen to be single and you're looking for your husband or your wife, you know, they exist. You know, you just, in God's time, whatever that is, you know, is very important. Okay, Randall told me I got to start winding this up. So I got to ask you an A-list guest question. We can do this, right? Yeah, we can. Because I didn't do it at the beginning. I asked a different one. Okay, so you get a category: eggs, magnets, or driving. Go ahead, pick one.
Well, you said eggs is the most fun.
It is. So, okay, so the egg question. Well, first, are you a firstborn by any chance?
Third.
Do you have any older brothers?
2.
Then you're actually a firstborn. Just because you are. You're the firstborn girl.
Yeah.
I'm not real surprised.
I was pretty excited.
Okay, so, I was just asked that. Okay, because not that this will impact your answer, but okay, so this is a silly question, but it was actually a psychologist that came up with it on Facebook. A friend of mine that I play pickleball with, he came up with it, so it's his fault if you don't like it, okay? So the question is, when you cook eggs, do you take them out of the carton and rearrange them, or what do you do? That's part one.
When I cook with eggs, I take them out one at a time and I crack them.
What do you do with the shells?
Empty them in a pitcher. Is that what you wanted to know?
No, do you put the eggs, where do you put the shells at?
Oh, I put them back in the cart until I'm done. Then I put them in the trash.
Oh, okay. Well, see? You would
This is not very interesting.
No, it's totally interesting, especially to my audience, because you would not believe the various things people do with eggshells. True story.
Oh.
Now, do you rearrange the eggs that are left in the carton, or do you just leave them where they're at?
I leave them.
Really? So, do you take them out in such a way that it's not unbalanced?
No, it's unbalanced.
You're my type of girl. Yeah, you are.
It's very unbalanced.
A firstborn with an unbalanced egg carton. I love it. Oh, that's classic. Okay. And that was it. See how scary that was? That was...
Gave you insights, did it?
It's just a fun question. Okay, the magnet question was, basically that question has to do with what kind of magnets do you have on your fridge, if any?
I just have one little tiny one that is about loving Texas. I married a Texan, and somebody gave that to us. He doesn't like magnets on the refrigerator, but that one passed.
There you go. Hey, you know what? You know how many people who are your super fans will now know that about you, and they'll go, oh my gosh, I heard that on Bible News Radio. I'll never forget it. All right. Do you want to do the driving one? This one really honestly has brought some people to tears, and I don't even know why, but, you know, just yes or no. It's near the end. If you cry, it's okay. Yeah? You're going to live on the edge? Okay. When you took your driver's test for the first time, did you pass?
That makes people cry.
People who didn't pass, yeah.
I did, but it took me a long time to get around to it. I was not a 16-year-old.
That's okay. That's all right. See, there you go. You did it. You answered all the A-list guest questions.
My father finally gave up and paid for me to have driver's ed.
That's what my mom did. She's like, well, she didn't pay for it. I had to pay for it, but I learned late myself. I get it. True story. All right. Yeah. So where can people get your book and your website and all that, everybody? This is the book again right here. Get it.
There's a link on the website. Takes them straight to Amazon. So, but it's on Amazon. They can get it from Amazon.
Yes.
If they read it, it'd be nice if they leave a note on Amazon.
Like a nice review.
Yeah, 5 stars, please.
You know what? For you, I'm going to go in there and write a 5-star review.
Okay.
I will do it. Because that will give you one more. Now, this book really deserves it, honestly. It does. I wouldn't, trust me, I don't do that for most people, but I will for this book because it needs it. And you guys should get it. If you like books, you'll like this book. And Darren, thank you for your comment over there on Facebook. I know people have been watching on Facebook, but nobody left a comment until just now. Darren said, ROFL. I can't believe someone else talks about the eggs. Love it. Ha ha ha. It is Bible News Radio, just so you know. All right, any final comments? Like for you, Carolyn.
No, I just, yeah.
You're done, huh? Okay. All right. That sounds good to me. Okay, so tomorrow, you guys, we have a guest coming up. Robert Jalanus or something like that. I don't know how to say his name. Anyway, we're going to be talking about discipling like Jesus or being discipled by Jesus. I think that's what we're talking about tomorrow. I don't know. I can't remember. But that's okay. Don't hold it against me. All right. So you guys remember, be bold, stand up, and go with God because he loves you no matter what. Okay? Just so you know. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.